Welcome back to Fullerton College's Prepress class. This is Professor Ben Kiewit, and we're carrying on with our PIA Prepress training system in section 6.1. We're talking about Prepress Workflow. Boring word, but interesting ideas. Here we are again. We're talking about the Postscript, or the older model of how to do this digitally. So, when you select print on a desktop publishing software, it creates Postscript and it sends that to the workflow. The workflow could then also fish back a PDF out of that. So even if you just do a file print and you're sending it to a plate maker or to a digital press, that is converting your document to Postscript using your computer to do the conversion. And then the rest of the Prepress workflow system is able to create the PDF and output it to the other devices like inkjet printers and plate setters. Inkjet printers, why inkjet? Well, oftentimes those are used for proofing to get a preliminary guess of what it's going to look like when you do the final job, which is very important to show clients, especially because some people who aren't in our industry have a difficult time projecting and imagining what something's going to look like. They don't have the same intuitive sense that you develop in printing to know what the outcome is going to be from the parts along the way. And forgive them if they don't trust that we do. It's hard to see that. Anyways. So what is Postscript? I know we talked about this a little bit before, but let's say it again. Postscript is a page description language. It describes everything that you've put together in InDesign or QuarkXPress or wherever else you've made it in a programming code that is understood universally among all computers and all printers. It was originally in a Postscript, sorry, wow, I'm stumbling over my words here. Originally built by Adobe. They invented Postscript, they wrote it. Anyways, so Postscript also used to be a different type of file which would use it to save it, which was called EPS, or Encapsulated Postscript. When I was a kid, that's what we used on computers to save our files from Illustrator and make our output files from QuarkXPress. And that is literally just Postscript. But a PDF is, again, a more streamlined, better version of Postscript. Anyways, we'll get back to that in a moment too. So why do you use Postscript? Because files constructed from a lot of different places. You can have a file made from any sort of graphic program on any sort of computer. And if you save it as a Postscript, it becomes universal. I know we're spoiled nowadays with how easy it is to transfer files from system to system and operating system to operating system across the unimaginable divide between the Windows and Mac worlds and between different types of equipment, but it was not always that easy. Things have gotten a lot easier and gotten a lot more universal than they used to be. So Postscript was wonderful as one of the few things that transferred cleanly from system to system. Bless their hearts. Thank you, Adobe. Good job there. Here's a picture of a document out of QuarkXPress on the left. QuarkXPress, for those of you who don't know, by the way, was the original program, the original killer app, the original desktop publishing program that made what you're learning here in this class possible. It was the first time someone created a computer system that didn't just do a Word type document where you just type up words and make reports. Oh no, QuarkXPress decided we're going to take all of paste up and stripping and turn that into a computer program. So instead of using knives and rulers and rubber cement, side note, I kind of miss that smell a little bit. I hope that's not a bad thing. Back to the main story again. Instead of doing all that by hand with rulers and knives and glue and paste and light tables, now you can do it on a computer with clicks of the mouse. That basically gives you the same tools that you would have had physically, but digitally. Anyways, that's QuarkXPress on the left. That's what started it out. Adobe came out later. I mean, Adobe existed, but they didn't have InDesign for a while. InDesign came out much later and basically took the idea of QuarkXPress and I would say copied it, but that's kind of rude, made it really usable. The original was a bit harder to use. Adobe's InDesign might seem difficult if you're not used to page layout programs, but my goodness, is it a much more streamlined thing than Quark is. But then again, I'm remembering Quark from like 1995. So maybe take that with a grain of salt. I'm sure they've made it better since then, but I've since moved on to InDesign. Anyways, so on the left is a QuarkXPress document, which you could also translate in your head to being something you'd see on your InDesign screen. And on the right is just the beginning of a lot of text and a lot of code that makes up what that is. That's Postscript. Now, if you go straight to exporting a PDF straight from your software, you don't need to create the Postscript. You don't need to file print. In fact, it has proven far better not to, because again, I can't say it enough. I'm sorry if you've heard it from me twice in the other video already, but if you export directly and you eliminate Postscript, you're not only saving time and energy, but the direct export from Adobe products into PDF does a better job handling gradients, transparencies, spot colors. Forgetting one of them. Why am I forgetting it? Oh, vector, the most important. And vector stays vector. It doesn't get converted to halftone information yet. If you do a file print to create Postscript, your vectors get converted to raster images. It's going to happen at some point anyways. But if it happens on your computer, on your Mac or your PC in InDesign, it's going to convert at 600 dots per inch, which sounds great, except that's half of what you really need to make it look very good, which is 1200 dots per inch. It's kind of the minimum for a good looking vector if you're printing black and white line art. Now, if you convert to a PDF instead of Postscript and send it to an output device, then whatever the output device's resolution is becomes a resolution of those vectors. So instead of a 600 dots per inch vector line, you get a 2400 or more dots per inch vector line, and that looks much, much cleaner. And again, all the other stuff too, the colors, the transparencies, many things get preserved better if you make a more direct export, because Postscript must rasterize. So making PDFs. To do this, you have to have two sequential steps. The first step is something that people don't necessarily think of. While PDFs can make some things more stable or more usable than getting, say, a native file mailed to you, I never like trying to open a Microsoft Word document to print from. It's much better if they convert that to a PDF, because then at least it's stable. However, just like we talked about in the color management section, PDFs do not fix anything, they preserve things. What I like about them is not what they do, but what they don't do. They don't change your pictures. They don't change your colors. They don't change your fonts. They don't change your layout. They preserve everything exactly the way you built it or your client built it. So if everything was created properly with good image resolution, with bleeds where they should be, with the correctly specified spot colors and everything set where it ought to be, the PDF will maintain that and it will print as perfectly as it was designed. And if they made it bad, the PDF will perfectly preserve every low resolution image, every poor font choice, every unused bleed, and every spot color named something weird will come right on through that PDF. So you still have to do the groundwork. You can't skip leg day here. You have to do the basics in order for the advanced stuff to work. Secondly, you have to use the right settings. It's possible to create the wrong kind of PDF. Since PDFs weren't designed only for printing, there are many interactive features and resolution settings in the outputs that are geared towards web viewing. Yes, Cassie? Uh-huh. Sorry, I have some extra input on this week's lecture. Many of you have met Cassie, daughter number 2. Anyways, in birth order, not in heart, don't worry. So you have to make sure that the appropriate image compression is in place, maybe make sure color management or conversion is set correctly, the fonts are embedded the right way, and don't worry, there will be at least a chapter dedicated only to doing this, so we don't need to go to that much detail right now. So the Prepress Workflow solutions, the next thing after you make the PDF is you have to check it, you have to pre-flight it. You can use software. We have in our class even used Acrobat itself to do prepress. That works. And you can check to see if the things are able to be repaired. Some things can be repaired automatically. It's possible to sometimes just click a button and have it automatically change something over from one color space to another, or to make sure the ICC profiles are tagged correctly. Some things require a bit more human interaction. There are some things that have to be done by a designer or by a file repair technician who can go in and actually make the changes necessary. So yeah, some stuff has to be repaired manually and requires the attention of someone with the right skills and tools. So preflighting, you can, some softwares will do some automatic repairs. So you can set up, this is a screen from Pit Stop by InFocus. You can set it up to look for problems and then fix them or report them as errors. depending on what software you're using. Even Acrobat has the ability to repair some of the minor issues. Some things are not fixable by Preflight tools. Some problems even require you to go back to the original source file, which is the native file from wherever it was built. InDesign, QuarkXPress, Illustrator, CorelDRAW. You have to go back to the original program to make some of the necessary fixes. So after pre-flight and file repair, then you get on to imposition and trapping. These are necessary for press and bindery. Let's look at what they are briefly. Imposition is arranging the sheets so that when you fold it and cut it and trim it and bind it together, you get a book or magazine or brochure that's in the correct order with everything facing the right way. This can be done very much automatically nowadays. In fact, to the point where it has shifted where you used to want people to send you printer spread PDFs, and now it's much more efficient if clients give you single page PDFs. I mean, multi-page, but not spreads, individual pages. So every time you scroll through the document, you see one page at a time. Those can be imposed through imposition software. It can also be done manually, and I've done many of these, and I'll make you guys do some of that in class too. Manual imposition is a good way to understand what it is. Trapping brings me back to one of my favorite awkward analogies ever. Also, the Admiral Akbar clip you had to watch right before this one because it's a trap. So trapping is a way of overlapping the different colors from different print plates so there's no gap between. Trap to avoid the gap. Let me give you my really horrible analogy that may scar you for life. You'll need years of therapy after this one. Imagine a plumber has come over to your place to fix your sink. And he's bent, it has to be a he for this because it requires just a slight more amount of growth, maybe some back hair involved. Anyway, so your plumber has come over to fix your sink at your house and he's knelt over, bent under your sink in your kitchen. And what do you guys see? You guys already know the answer to this. That's right. His plumber uniform shirt and his plumber uniform pants part ways right at the waist. And you get to see what brand of tighty whities he's wearing. That little white strip that shows his underwear. That's right. So that is basically the same problem as trapping. If the pants and the shirt don't overlap enough and there's any slight error, any slight movement, then you start to see the gap between them. And the gap is unsightly. Nobody wants to see that, right? Good. You don't want to see that. So trapping on the computer is avoiding the same thing. If you print two colors and they're supposed to touch each other but not overlap, and the plates get slightly off during the print run or the paper shifts just a little bit, you can get an unsightly white hairline between those colors, breaking the illusion of whatever image or graphic you're going to be showing and making it look kind of lame. So what do? Well, let's go back to our original analogy on this one. How do you deal with not showing your tighty whitey waistline, right? What do? You wear a longer shirt and you tuck it into your pants, which is to say you create a small overlap. If your shirt only came down to touch the top of your trousers, then you have no wiggle room. Anything you do is going to show that gap. But if your shirt's longer than your pants and there's an overlap of 1 inch or 3, or even 1 inch isn't really enough for shirt and pants, but if you have enough overlap, you're not going to get the gap, even if you bend over. If you use way too much, you end up with like a baby onesie, which snaps underneath, and that way it never comes out. Isn't that right, Cassie? That's right. So anyways, trapping creates a very small, sometimes even microscopic overlap between two colors that touch each other to allow just for a little bit of slippage on the press. Again, I'm not going to go super detailed right now because there are whole chapters devoted to this. So after this, RIP. I don't remember the Latin for rest in peace, or I would make a really funny joke here and probably play the Dies Irae and start chanting, but oh well. The RIP is the raster image processor. Raster images are pixel images. A raster image processor converts everything into pixel data, and beyond that, screen pixel data. Not just pixels, but pixels with the intent of making halftone screens. Here's a great picture of what a RIP does. So you take this picture at the top, rasterization converted whatever graphic this was from 3 triangles-ish. I know I'm not quite saying the shapes correctly, but the red, the yellow, and the blue sections into pixels. And you can kind of see how they touch to each other. There's a little bit of anti-aliasing where the colors are a little bit in between on them. And that's rasterizing. Past rasterizing is screening. Screening is when you take that and convert it into halftones. And I love this picture down here. I'll even zoom in on it for a minute so we can look at this. Because one of the things you don't think about necessarily with screening and with trapping, hey, stop scrolling. Stop that computer. Bad computer. You can see that the halftone dots continue. For instance, in this picture, that yellow is a slightly orangey yellow. So when it's screened out and made into halftone dots, that's made up of yellow and magenta, and even a tiny bit of cyan dots in it. The red area is made out of magenta and cyan, and that's all you see in there. And the blue area is made out of magenta and, sorry, I meant magenta and yellow for the red. I was looking at the wrong thing. Magenta and cyan makes the blue section, and you can see when they overlap, it looks more like an indigo purpley color. So for screening here, you can see there's a few of those cyan dots overlap with some of the yellow dots where the red and the blue sections meet. And that's the trap happening. That's allowing a little bit of overlap so that you don't get any harsh changes with white between them. Oh, don't you boop me. There we go. We're almost done. I know we're slightly over time on this video, and I'm sorry. Thank you for your patience. Yeah, Cassie says hi. Hi. Finally, you output it to a marking engine. A marking engine is anything that puts marks on a physical object. A marking engine can be a printer. It could be an inkjet printer. It could be an actual plate setter that makes plates to go on an offset press. It can be a digital printer if you're going to print it digitally. It can be an engraver. It can be all sorts of things. Anything that actually does physical world marking to translate the computer image into something that you can actually hold in your hands. That's the end of the Prepress Workflow overture. We're going to go into details on this starting in the next couple weeks. Thanks for listening.